So, Catwoman is one of the Batman series' most popular characters. Initially a villain, this feline-themed thief has had such a long history serving as a romantic foil to the Dark Knight, flirting with him even as he hands her over to the authorities. And over the years, Catwoman has moved towards heroism, protecting and looking after the down-and-outs of Gotham, but still keeping her eyes out for anything shiny she can get her paws on. In short, she's had a very long tenure within the comics with lots of ups and downs. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 things that DC Comics wants you to forget about Catwoman. Number 10. She had a sidekick. Katrina Falcone was the youngest member of the Falcone crime family. Her uncle Mario made use of her natural skills in agility and escape artistry as a map maker, noting down weak points in buildings for future heists. Eventually, Mario decides that Kitty knew too much and tried to have her killed, but she was saved by Catwoman, who decided to train Katrina to be a hero. Katrina only had a brief career as Catgirl. She tried to help Catwoman take down the crazed murderer the Reaper, but her rebellious nature and impulsiveness caused her to constantly get in the way, often doing more harm than good. Selina tried to convince Katrina that she should give up as Catgirl and go live a normal life instead. At first, Kitty refused and ran off with her costume. However, when an attempt to take down her uncle caused her to get shot, she decided to hang up the mantle. Katrina left Gotham to go to boarding school, but promised to one day return to be Catgirl. Despite that, she hasn't been seen since. Number 9. That sex scene. When Catwoman got her own series following the New 52 reboot, DC wanted to start things off with a bang, and boy, did they. In an attempt to appear mature, Catwoman number 1 threw out character development in favor of gratuitous shots of Selina Kyle in her underwear. In the issue's pun incoming climax, Batman and Catwoman get jiggy on the floor of her apartment whilst still wearing their costumes. It is an uncomfortable scene, quite literally in fact, because both characters seem to be in some pretty severe spinal discomfort, and the detailed artwork only serves to make things even more awkward. The issue was incredibly controversial, not just for the excessive fan service, but for the way that Catwoman seemingly forces herself on Batman, raising eyebrows over the dubious consent of the scene. When asked about it by Newsarama, writer Judd Winnick gave a pretty classic non-answer of, "This is a Catwoman for 2011, and my approach to her character and actions reflects someone who lives in our times, and wears a catsuit, and steals. It's a tale that is part crime story, part mystery, and part romance. In that, you will find action, suspense, and passion. Each of those qualities, at times, plays to their extremes." And that definitely was extreme. Number 8. She had her mind wiped. In another early attempt by DC to tell darker stories, the miniseries Identity Crisis revealed that the villain Dr. Light had assaulted Sue Dibney, the wife of Elongated Man. In response, the Justice League had the magician Zatanna wipe his mind. In a later story, Catwoman found out that she had undergone a similar process. At the time, Selina had more or less fully reformed and was in a committed relationship with Batman. However, she found out that her turn towards heroism was actually the result of Zatanna wiping her mind years ago at the behest of the Justice League. The revelation and the doubt over whether she could trust her own emotions caused Catwoman to have a breakdown, and she slid back towards villainy. In retaliation, she taped shut Zatanna's mouth and threw her out of a window. This return to more brutal methods meant that when the Black Mask returned later to threaten Selina's sister, Catwoman shot him right in the head, killing him. But the story seemed to have been abandoned in the New 52 though, with Selina acting as an anti-hero again of her own free will. Number 7. She got her ass handed to her by Elektra. In 1996, Marvel and DC both came together to publish DC vs. Marvel comics. The series revolved around two godlike beings from each universe choosing heroes to fight in one-on-one battles to decide whose universe was the best. The issues contained a mixture of predetermined battles, like Aquaman dropping a whale on Namor, and fights decided by reader vote, like Storm realizing that she could just electrocute Wonder Woman from absolutely miles away. One of the predetermined battles was a face-off between anti-heroes Elektra and Catwoman. Now, you might think that the outcome of a fight between a kleptomaniac and a lady who kills at least 8 people before breakfast would be pretty obvious. And you know what? You would be pretty right. Elektra handily trounced Catwoman, slicing Selina's whip in half with a sigh as she dangled off a building. Catwoman survived the fall by landing in a dumpster full of sand, but was tragically too unconscious to realize the obvious kitty litter joke. Now, this series led to the creation of the Amalgam Universe, where DC and Marvel heroes were combined. Here, Catwoman and Elektra were merged into Cat's Eye, a master assassin. Number 6. Her rather dumb origin. Like a lot of characters, Catwoman's origin story has been changed a lot over the years. Now, usually it revolves around Selina turning to a life of crime to escape a childhood of poverty and abuse, but her original origin was far more stupid. After making numerous appearances throughout the early issues of Batman, in Batman number 62 in 1950, we finally got Catwoman's origin story. Selina Kyle was actually an amnesiac flight attendant who had lost her memory in a plane crash. She remembered all of this after being hit on the head by rubble while saving Batman from a collapsing building. Why amnesia turned her into a criminal or how more brain trauma counteracted the earlier brain trauma is anyone's guess, but it's probably best to just leave that alone. Trying to argue with 50s comic book logic is a path down which lies only more madness. Now, this origin would actually be retconned a year later anyway when Catwoman revealed that she'd lied about her past to temporarily retire from crime. It would be a long time before we would learn her real origin though, as the Comics Code of Authority banned the use of seductive femme fatales for over a decade. Number 5. She used to be a dominatrix. Frank Miller is well known for his ability to write dark and brooding Batman in a grim and gritty Gotham, so it's no surprise that his Batman Year One is hailed as one of the best Batman stories ever written. But Frank Miller is also well known for his less than progressive views on women, so it's also no surprise that his version of Catwoman is a sex worker. This version of Selina Kyle worked as a dominatrix to get out from under her pimp until Batman's actions inspired her to give up this former life and become a vigilante, also adopting an underage prostitute named Holly Robinson as her ward. Now, amazingly, this origin story is still technically canon, as it hasn't been explicitly retconned and was even a big part of the 1989 Catwoman series. However, while stories since have touched on the fact that Selina has an abusive past, they've understandably shied away from talking about her red light district days, and it seems unlikely that DC would want it mentioned in any of their other media. Number 4. She's a murderer. One thing that has traditionally separated Catwoman from the rest of Batman's rogues is that she operates by a strict no-kill rule, going out of her way to avoid harming innocents during her crimes. When she chose to kill Black Mask, it was treated as a huge moment for Selina. It was the first time that she had knowingly chosen to kill someone, and the guilt of that decision haunted her. It turns out, though, that Catwoman was just super forgetful, because during the 1970s, Catwoman was portrayed as far less moral and willing to do whatever it took to complete crimes. This version of Catwoman was happy to kill anyone who got in her way and was frequently shown committing murder. These stories were later declared to have taken place in the alternate reality of Earth B, named after writer Bob Haney, whose stories were notorious for their continuity mistakes. A recent issue of Tom King's Batman completely blew this out of the water though, with the revelation that Catwoman had actually killed 237 people. The members of the terrorist group Dogs of War blew up the orphanage where Selina grew up, killing everyone inside. She then took it upon herself to travel the world, hunting down and killing every last one of them. Apparently, it's more of a no-kill guideline. Number 3. She had a daughter. In the alternate timeline known as Earth 2, Catwoman and Batman married and had a daughter named Helena, who grew up to be the hero Huntress. DC would later adapt this idea into their main continuity, and following Infinite Crisis, the DC universe jumped ahead a year to find some of its heroes living very different lives. One of the biggest changes was that Selina Kyle had retired as Catwoman after giving birth to a daughter who she called Helena. The mystery of who Helena's father was stretched out over the course of the entire Catwoman series, with plenty of clues being dropped that it was Batman. However, in a massive twist that nobody saw coming, Helena's father was actually a man named Sam Bradley Jr., the son of one of Catwoman's allies, Detective Sam Bradley. Selina later returned to being Catwoman to save her friend Holly Robinson. This ultimately led to her giving up her daughter after the movie-inspired serial killer film freak kidnapped her. Catwoman was able to save Helena, but the ordeal made her realize that her life as Catwoman would always put her daughter in danger, so she gave her up for adoption. Neither Helena nor Sam Bradley Jr. have been mentioned at all in the New 52, and they're both unlikely to show up again. Number 2. Her ridiculous costumes. Catwoman's iconic costume is as simple as it is practical. It's just a black catsuit with a pointy-eared hood and goggles. However, her original costume was anything but. Well, second costume, technically. In her first appearance, Selina Kyle's silly gimmick was actually dressing up like an old woman to commit crimes. She was also just called the Cat, despite lacking any feline-themed equipment. In subsequent appearances, though, she went by Catwoman and wore her more classic costume, an outfit that only somebody in the 1950s would think was a good idea. But saying that, the fact that Catwoman is able to race across rooftops in the middle of the night wearing high heels and a tight knee-length dress is actually pretty impressive. Selina has made some other pretty questionable fashion choices over the years, including a mask with whiskers, a suit that looks like her costume from the Batman TV show, but here in a particularly vivid shade of snot green, and a costume combining the worst aspects of all the others, which was a bright yellow dress with a mask that made her look like an actual cat. Yeah, it's a look. And number 1, the movie. Of course, this movie is going to be the top of the list. The only people watching this who didn't expect the Catwoman film to be at number 1 are the ones who spent millions on therapy trying to block out the memory that this abomination ever happened. And if you're one of those people, then, well, sorry for that. That being said, it almost feels like a cheat to put this on the list because despite originally being conceived as a spin-off to Batman Returns, the film has absolutely nothing in common with Catwoman. Instead, we got the story of a woman named Patience Phillips. And I just want to point out right here that that is not how you spell or pronounce Selina Kyle, who gets murdered by an evil cosmetics company and is then brought back to life by a magic cat. This gives her the abilities of a cat, which apparently include worse fashion sense than 1950 Selina Kyle and the power to turn into a flailing mess of bad CGI whenever she jumps. Everything about this movie is horrible. The Golden Raspberry winning acting, the plot, which again is about a magic cat lady fighting an evil makeup company, the effects, the costume, the soundtrack, and the acting and the plot again because it's impossible to overstate how bad they actually are. Thankfully, there is no chance of any of this making its way into future Catwoman media. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 things that DC Comics wants you to forget about Catwoman. I hope you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Twitter at RetroJ with a 0, or you can swing by Live and Let's Dice where I do all my streaming outside of work, and it'd be great to see you over there, my friends. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.